Radiant Energy Aerial Capture, REAC, and Transformation Device. Warning: the use of longer wire or coax in excess of 500 feet or higher than head height can produce lethal results. This file is for information and entertainment. If you choose to experiment with this design or with high voltage, you do so entirely at your own risk. On giving credit to where it is due, various different people and their experiments, from Bill Beatty's Weird Science, J.L. Naughton's lab, to a South African researcher on aerial balloon experiments, John Bedini, Tom Bearden. And culminating in this, Wiley Aman through CUAE4YW, Mitch and others. This is a very simple device that could be found by scavenging parts and buying a few others and is quite cheap and effective. How this works as I see it in my simplistic version and John Bedini's more technical version. 1. The long wire acts as an antenna and a capacitor, and as it builds up charge, it discharges a spark that jumps the gap, is then stepped down by the coil, and then pulsed to the battery through the use of the capacitor. This is my simple view of the device. 2. John Bedini's more technical version, as per his October 8 post to the KeelyNet Interact discussion list, the long wire captures radiant energy, as the charge builds up and jumps the gap, spark, longitudinal waves, it is then stepped down in the coil. For those who do not know it, the coil in your car was invented by Tesla and is a small Tesla coil. It is then charging the battery, where it is transformed via a square or pulse width modulation wave at low frequency and is the reactive power that charges your battery. It works, and as far as I am concerned is all that matters. On using coax cable, the end of the coax is taped off and the end that is attached to the spark plug, the wires are twisted together. According to John Bedini, as he explained to me, when you cut one end off and twist the other two ends together, what you have is a high dielectric absorber antennae. The positively charged particles from the atmosphere get trapped in between the skin and the inner wire, making a condenser of sorts. As he explained it, there are two things going on: the rate of charge in the wire that is oscillating in nature at one frequency, and the discharge frequency in sharp DC transient pulse to the battery that is at its own rate. If you look at the pulse rate, it would almost look like a triangle wave flattened off and would follow the gravitational wave frequency of about 8 kHz. Original circuit. Single strand wire on coaxial wire. Attach wire on cable coax to end of spark plug. Attach wire to threaded portion of spark plug. 12-volt car coil. 12-volt battery. 1 to 4 kV capacitor. Bedini correction. Single strand wire on coaxial wire. Attach wire on cable coax to end of spark plug. Attach wire to threaded portion of spark plug. 12-volt car coil. 12-volt battery. 1 to 4 kV capacitor. Bedini air power circuit. Setup. 1. Using either regular insulted wire or coax, waterproof the end. The wire or coax may be laid out in any fashion as long as it is insulated from any potential ground and to itself. 2. Attach the wire, coax, twist the ends together first, and attach it to the end of the spark plug. 3. Attach a wire to the threaded portion of the spark plug, the end that goes into your motor, and attach it to the positive, plus, of your 12-volt car coil. 4. Attach a wire to the negative, of the 12-volt car coil and attach it to the, plus, positive terminal of a 12-volt battery. I prefer deep cycle batteries, but for basic experimentation purposes I don't think it will matter. 5. Attach a wire from the taller center of your car coil to a 1 to 4 kV capacitor, a few picofarad will do, and then a wire from the other leg of the capacitor to a good earth ground and to the negative terminal of the battery. Note: I use the coil plug wire with just the coil connector, under the rubber boot with wire soldered to it for a good snug fit. Have fun and enjoy. Electrodes for Power Q&A, February 7, 01. The following information is not currently endorsed by KeelyNet because we have no direct physical evidence of the claims, though of course are highly intrigued. This document contains unverified claims and is being posted at the request of Paul Clint. Question: What is an electret? Answer: a solid electrically insulating, or dielectric, material that has acquired a long-lasting electrostatic polarization. Electrets are produced by heating certain dielectric materials to a high temperature and then letting them cool while immersed in a strong electric field. An electret is an analog of a permanent magnet. The Columbia Encyclopedia, 6th edition states, if you take one electret and one magnet you will get a surprise. When not in motion, these two differing objects will have no effect on one another. It is only when you move them that anything happens, and it is not the familiar attraction-repulsion. When a pole of the magnet is in relative motion to a pole of the electret, they push each other at 90 degrees to the direction of motion. The effect is entirely odd and immediately unfamiliar, unless you are a physics student. How to make an electret? Question: Can the electret effect be used to generate power directly? Answer: the general consensus of the experts is no, but there are some new techniques that raise doubts about their certainty. One new technique is to mix ferrite granules into the dielectric when it is formed. A magnetic field applied at a right angle to the resulting electret's field has a dramatic effect in maximizing and recharging the electret effect. There is very little doubt, however, that the electret is much more effective in generating power indirectly by using its field to move and trap existing electrostatic charges. A prime example of this are reports from amateur radio operators of the static charges collected by coaxial cables. A great many of the numerous claimed free energy machines are obviously employing the electret effect to collect electrostatic charge. Question: In what materials can the strongest manifestation of the electret effect be produced? Answer: in general, the higher a material's insulating properties are, the better an electret it will form. Thus, Teflon is near the top of the list, with glass, plastics and ceramics. Another important factor in plastic materials is the strength of the polymer bonds. This factor also relates to the fact that the thinner the material is, the more intense the electret's field, because the stress on the polymer's bond is transmitted through less intermediate material. But this is limited by the dielectric constant as well, because if the electret's field generates a voltage high enough to break down the dielectric resistance, the device arcs across its own field and self-destructs. Question: Where can I learn more about electrets? Answer: here are some references. See Electrostatics, and its Applications by A.D. Moore, 1973, is a very well-researched book on electrets, p. 122, 130, and electrostatic machines, Handbook of Electrostatic Processes by Zhenxi Chang, 1995, pp. 509 on electrets. The first person to make an electret was Mototaro Iguchi, see his On the Permanent Electret paper in Philosophical Magazine Vol 49, 1925, pp. 178. How to Make an Electret by C.L. Strong in Scientific American Vol 203, November 1960, p. 202, 210 is a practical description of how to make an electret using carnauba wax. Question: How can a small cable extract so much energy from the kinetic energy of the wind? Answer: your dilemma is easily resolved. The energy collected from the cable generator is not derived from the kinetic energy of the wind. As you may or may not be aware, the Earth's atmosphere is a gigantic capacitor. At its upper level, air molecules are constantly being ionized, and then as the air circulates, the charge is eventually carried to the ground, which has a negative charge with respect to the upper atmosphere. Another source of atmospheric charge is condensing water vapor. As water evaporates, it gathers electrons the molecules in the liquid state are sharing, and leaves behind a positive charge. When it condenses in the atmosphere, it gives back the electrons, creating a negative charge. This is why the cable generator's output increases in stormy weather. Ham radio operators will certainly confirm that a coaxial cable strung out as an antenna will pick up static charge, especially in wet, stormy weather. So the power is derived from the atmospheric charge rather than kinetic energy. This is clearly demonstrated from the fact that the power generated is directly proportional to the square of the speed of the wind rather than the cube of the speed. Question: still the wire hardly intersects any of the wind. Even if the power isn't from the wind's kinetic energy, how can a little wire collect so much? Answer: the cross-section of the wind from which power is collector is much larger than you might think. Remember that the electret effect creates an electric field which attracts charged air molecules like a magnet attracts iron. The cross-section of this field can be as great as 2 feet, so a 100-foot cable could intersect as much wind as a 16-foot diameter airfoil. There are occasions static charge is generated though two objects are not in contacted. If a charged object moves against other object, static charge of the other object will be increased or decreased. This is called as a field-induced charging. The moving charged thundercloud charges neighboring clouds because of field-induced charging. Question: have you measured the cable generator's power output? Answer: measurement of the output of the cable generator is not a simple process. The form out the output varies over several orders of magnitude for voltage, current and frequency and is thus well beyond the capability of all simple measuring devices. As a consequence of this fact, I have devised a couple of indirect methods. In the first of these, I connected the spark plug between the generator and ground so that whenever the generator voltage builds up to the R cover value, a pulse of current is generated that can be counted. Upon further investigation, this method can be termed no more than a rough estimate because the shape and duration of the pulse still varies over a substantial range. Analysis of the pulses will eventually allow us to use an average and thus devise a formula that will give a close approximation of the power output. The second method is simple and if done properly, very accurate. We simply place a resistive heating element between the generator and ground and then into a bucket of water. The output is measured by the change in temperature of the water. Neither of these methods takes into account the losses of the charging circuit, battery, or inverter. Question: does the electret effect wear out or dissipate over time? Answer: the question as to whether the electret effect wears out is not a simple one to answer. I am clearly using it in a way that is different. The fact of the matter is that, in general, the electret effect is unwanted, and engineers are normally working to prevent or eliminate it. The fact that they have to work very hard to do so is an indication that it is pretty stable. Thus, the best answer I can give is that it doesn't wear out in the short term, years. I have learned that when the electret effect was first observed, it was produced in a relatively soft wax and if left undischarged for a long period of time, dissipated. In order to preserve an electret device in these soft mediums, they wrapped them in foil which would have continually discharged them. This would at first seem to contrary to what one would expect, as the continual discharge would be, in effect, dissipating the energy the electret produced. But if you look at it from the perspective of the effect that the electric field has on the material of the device itself, it is easily understood. The electric field would produce a counter force against the molecular distortion that was producing it which would tend to undo the distortion. This means that an electret placed in a circuit which used its field at a low level would be very, very stable. Question: how can I determine if the cable wind generator will produce more power for its cost than I would have to pay the utility company? Answer: again, this can only be done over a long time period because it is dependent on wind, location, humidity and possibly other lesser undetermined factors. Question: how can I be sure that the power to a load is energy from the cable generator rather than the battery or some hidden source? Answer: this is impossible because there is no difference between them. I can take a simple circuit that charges two capacitors in parallel from a dead battery and then connect the capacitors in series and discharges them back into the battery. Although no new energy is put into the battery, some of the battery's potential chemical energy in the battery is converted and the battery will appear to be fully charged. The charging pulses from our controller, or the spark gap coil, is closer to the double capacitor circuit than it is to a normal battery charger, DC. Question: how can the high voltage static current produced by the cable generator be altered to a usable form? Answer: the only practical method I have found to date is to charge a battery. There are, however, a number of people who have received patents on high voltage electrostatic motors. Some generators with similarities to the Testatica machine are the electrostatic energy field power generating system invented by William W. Hyde, U.S. Patent 4897592 of January 30, 1990, is a rotor/stator variable capacitance machine capable of producing 300 kV. Other such generators are, parametric electric machine invented by Ferdinand Kapp, U.S. Patent 4622510 of November 11, 1986, which has a series resonant, LCR, circuit structured into it so that it oscillates, and indeed operates at resonance to ensure a high output, electrostatic generator invented by Dan B. L. E. May, et al., U.S. Patent 3094653 of June 18, 1963, is a very ingenious system of variable capacitance. The electrostatic machine by Noel Felici, U.S. Patent 2522106 of September 12, 1950, is a good standard which utilizes a valve rectifier, and the electrostatic generator by William S. Spencer, U.S. Patent 1415779 of May 9, 1922, is an early rotor/stator generator which transferred its electric impulses through a transformer to produce a higher current output. Here is another method developed by Van de Graaff himself. For Van de Graaff's transformer see U.S. Patents 3,323,069, May 30, 1967, and 3,187,208, June 1, 1965. These patents were not just for a Van de Graaff high-voltage generator, they were for a special system devised by Van de Graaff long after his generator had been in use to convert static electricity into current electricity. Question: how can you charge a battery with high-voltage static current? Answer: thus far, I have devised two methods. The first is simple and inexpensive but only 15 to 20% efficient. It simply involves breaking the current into pulses with a spark gap, and then transforming the voltage down and current up with a coil and increasing the pulse duration with a capacitor in parallel with the coil. The second method uses a microprocessor to monitor current and voltage. The impedance is then adjusted to make the charging current as smooth as possible. This circuit can also easily protect a battery from overcharging. Question: how does humidity affect the cable generator's operation? Answer: ham radio operators have reported that static discharges are more common and more intense in times of high humidity or atmospheric changes resulting in rain or snow. The technical literature reports that most atmospheric charge is carried by aerosol particles of dust or water that collect 100s, 1000s and sometimes even tens of thousands of units of charge. As they collect more and more charge, these particles migrate toward the Earth's surface and constitute a major component of the fair weather current. Question: does the cable generator attract lightning? Answer: lightning is a discharge of built-up electrical charges that is initiated by an electrostatic potential sufficient to rupture the dielectric, air, between the charge differential. This is facilitated by sharp-pointed objects that concentrate the electric field, lightning rods and the like. If the potential difference can be minimized by discharging the area below one of the plates, cold layer, and keeping the potential below the rupture point, a lightning strike is significantly less likely to occur. The generator system, if spread over a large area, would appear as a more positively charged area as it is bleeding electrons off to the ground through its load system. Thus the generator could well serve as a shield from a direct strike, but the electromagnetic pulse effect of a local strike could be devastating. Question: have you tested the cable generator in other configurations such as a spiral, grid, or vertical mode? Answer: the output of the cable generator is reduced by any alteration of the cable generator from a suspension 5 to 15 feet from the ground in a straight line. Question: what type of cable works best? And has anyone measured the ion density of the atmosphere? Answer: not just yes, but a qualified yes. The average is 3000 ions/cubic meter. The figure is subject to stupendous variations of many orders of magnitude, as shown by this quote from Atmospheric Electricity in the Planetary Boundary Layer by William A. Hoppel, R.V. Anderson and Owen C. Willett. Most atmospheric processes are interrelated and cannot be studied in isolation, but it is possible to identify one or two dominant influences. In the case of atmospheric electricity in the planetary boundary layer, however, separating the various causes and their effects can be extremely difficult. In fact, this field may be unique with respect to its sensitivity to many disparate phenomena spanning a tremendous range of scales in both space and time. For example, locally produced turbulent fluctuations in space charge density have an effect roughly comparable in magnitude to that of changes in the global thunderstorm activity on electric field variations within the planetary boundary layer. Question: the ion density does not appear to provide enough charge to account for the current generated by the cable. Are there other sources of energy contributing to the current? Answer: both the electric field of the Earth, typically 100 to 200 volts, and that of the cable generator produce an effect called the induction charging mechanism, a physical process for particle charging involving the collision of pairs of particles in an ambient electric field. Electric charge induced on the particle surfaces by the ambient electric field is made available for transfer when the two particles come into contact. Subsequent differential particle motions under gravity is postulated to result in large-scale charge separation. The specific role of induction charging in the electrification of thunderclouds has not been resolved. Another effect which is unquestionably affecting the cable generator is the double-layer effect described below. On the surface of a substance, a layer of electric dipoles whose axes have an average orientation normal to the surface. Double layers may appear on interfaces of solid and gas, liquid and gas, liquid and liquid, etc. They arise whenever media with different electron affinities, forces of attraction, or work function, are contiguous, and if dipoles are available. A net potential difference, the electrokinetic potential, exists across a double layer. Still another source of atmospheric charge collected by the cable generator are aerosol charges. These are particles of dust or water which form dipoles and disproportionately collect one charge or the other. Where ions carry only single or double units of charge, aerosols carry 100s to tens of thousands of units of charge. The fact humidity is such an important factor in the output of the cable generator indicates that aerosols are an important source of the energy it collects. Question: what else would be needed besides a cable generator to provide a good alternate electrical source for a home? Answer: you would need a battery or bank of batteries, a charge controller and a grid-tied inverter. Radiant energy, unraveling Tesla's greatest secret. The story you are about to read is derived from a carefully researched paper presented by Dr. Peter Lindemann before a private audience in Irvine, California on September 12, 2000. The lecture was titled "The Free Energy Secrets of Cold Electricity." It detailed the story of radiant energy and its successful application by Edwin Gray in an over-unity motor design which Gray debuted in 1973. The real detective work, and credit, in uncovering Tesla's discovery of radiant energy came from author Gary Vasileidos in his recent book, Secrets of Cold War Technology, without which Lindemann could not have solved the enigma of Gray's radiant circuit design. This lecture delivered the goods. The secret of Tesla's radiant energy has finally been revealed in manifold detail and only awaits the industry of those who care to study and understand it. Part 1 presents a general overview of Tesla's discovery and the political intrigues that led to its subsequent suppression. Part 2 will detail the nuts and bolts of how Tesla produced radiant energy with block diagrams, schematics, and drawings from Tesla's original patents to illustrate all of the necessary elements and parameters required. Additional details on Gray's modern adaptation of Tesla's radiant circuitry and a brief look at Eric Dollard, the only man to successfully recreate Tesla's Colorado Springs magnifying transmitter and reproduce the pure steaming white rays of radiant energy in 1986 exactly as described by Tesla in his Colorado journals. Ken Adachi. Of all the great inventions and discoveries of Nikola Tesla, nothing stood out with greater potential benefit to the whole of humanity than his discovery of radiant energy in 1889. The series of observations that led to the discovery of radiant energy initially grew out of experiments that Tesla had conducted in an attempt to duplicate the results that Heinrich Hertz had claimed to achieve in affirming the existence of electromagnetic waves, the discovery of which Hertz announced in 1887. While replicating Hertz's experiments, Tesla experimented with violently abrupt DC electrical discharges and discovered a new force in the process. Only after conducting exhaustive experimental trials for the next 3 years, did Tesla announce this stupendous discovery in a paper published in December, 1892, entitled The Dissipation of Electricity. Incredibly, most academicians of the day completely missed the mark in understanding the true significance of his paper. Noted scientists such as Sir Oliver Lodge, mistakenly thought that Tesla was referring to high-frequency AC electricity in the operation of the Tesla transformer, a huge blunder that remains to this day in the misnaming and misinterpretation of the Tesla coil. The transformer that Tesla referred to in the 1892 paper did not operate on magnetic/electric field induction created by alternating currents. It operated in an entirely new domain of physics based on abrupt discharges of electrostatic potentials and the subsequent release of kinetic radiant energy from the omnipresent ether. Tesla was now operating under entirely new rules which he referred to as dynamic electrostatic forces and had, by now, completely abandoned any further interest in the AC waveform. The genesis of the Lodge misunderstanding, however, began a few years earlier with the publication of certain mathematical formulas by a brilliant Scotsman named James Clerk Maxwell. Maxwell's equations. Using mathematical models, James Clerk Maxwell had earlier suggested that two different types of electrical disturbances could possibly exist in nature. One type was a longitudinal electric wave which required alternating concentrations of densified and rarefied pulsations of electrostatic fields that moved along a single vector. Today, we refer to these as standing waves or scalar waves. Maxwell ultimately rejected this idea because he was convinced that this type of wave propagation was impossible to achieve, but his assumption was erroneous and would later portend formidable consequences for Tesla and the world at large. Maxwell's second wave postulation was that of a transverse electromagnetic wave that exhibited a rapid alternation of electric fields along a fixed axis that radiated away from its point of origin at the speed of light and was detectable at great distances. Maxwell had more faith in the existence of this type of wave and encouraged experimenters to look in this direction. It was the discovery of this type of wave that Hertz had laid claim to, but Tesla was meticulous and fastidious in replicating Hertz's experimental parameters and he could not obtain the results claimed by Hertz. Tesla discovered a fundamental flaw in Hertz's experiment. Hertz had failed to take into account the presence of air in his experiments. Hertz had mistakenly identified electrostatic inductions or electrified shock waves as true electromagnetic waves. Tesla was saddened to bring this news to the distinguished academician, but felt scientific honesty was paramount if progress was to be achieved. Tesla visited Hertz in Germany and personally demonstrated the experimental error to him. Hertz agreed with Tesla and had planned to withdraw his claim, but reputations, political agendas, national pride, and above all, powerful financial interests, intervened in that decision and set the stage for a major rift in the accepted theories that soon became transformed into the fundamental laws of the electric sciences that have held sway in industry and the halls of academia to the present day. Tesla's introduction to the phenomena of radiant energy began with early observations by linesmen working for Thomas Edison, Tesla's former employer. DC anomalies. Before Tesla's invention of the polyphase AC generator became the industry standard and overtook Thomas Edison's use of DC generators, the DC electrical system was the only system available to deliver electricity to America's homes and factories. Due to the resistance offered by long transmission lines, Edison had to produce very high DC voltages from his generators in order to deliver enough voltage and current to its final destination. He also had to provide additional pumping stations along the way to boost the sagging voltage which dwindled from line losses. A curious anomaly occurred in the very first instant of throwing the power switch at the generating station. Purple/blue colored spikes radiated in all directions along the axis of the power lines for just a moment. In addition, a stinging, ray-like shocking sensation was felt by those who stood near the transmission lines. In some cases, when very large DC voltages surged from the generators, the stinging sensation was so great that occasionally a blue spike jumped from the line and grounded itself through a workman, killing him in the process. Tesla realized almost immediately that electrons were not responsible for such a phenomena because the blue spike phenomena ceased as soon as the current started flowing in the lines. Something else was happening just before the electrons had a chance to move along the wire. At the time, no one seemed to be very interested in discovering why these dramatic elevations in static electrical potential were taking place, but rather, engineering design efforts were focused on eliminating and quenching this strange anomaly, which was considered by everyone to be a nuisance except Tesla. Tesla viewed it as a powerful, yet unknown form of energy which needed to be understood and harnessed if possible. The phenomena only exhibited itself in the first moment of switch closure, before the electrons could begin moving. There seemed to be a bunching or choking effect at play, but only briefly. Once the electrons began their movement within the wire, all would return to normal. What was this strange energy that was trying to liberate itself so forcefully at the moment of switch closure? Tesla, genius out of time. In the later quarter of the 19th century, Tesla was alone in his opposition to the fundamental views of the nature of electrical forces as described by three of the biggest names in electric science, James Clerk Maxwell, Hermann von Helmholtz, and Heinrich Hertz. Tesla possessed a broader vision of the cosmos because his keen sense of awareness and especially his natural intuitive insights gave him a deeper understanding of the role that the ether, or ether, played in the manifestations of all electrical phenomena, while his contemporaries focused their attention exclusively on the electromagnetic component, assuming that no other component could be involved. This lack of etheric insight by his contemporaries, with the exception of Sir William Crookes, and the heated controversy that the mere mention of the ether had engendered, was to cause Tesla ridicule and sarcasm from men of inferior intellect for decades. The ether controversy largely dissipated in the academic arena after the publication of Einstein's theory of relativity, 1905, and the Michelson-Morley experiment, which essentially declared that the ether theory was dead, but Tesla's insights and deductions concerning the role of the ether were correct all along. The ether existed then and it exists now, despite the lockstep denials by mainstream science, past or present. Rudolf Steiner, another man of genius, affirmed that the ether was composed of four fractions which he described as 1, the light ether, 2, the warmth ether, 3, the chemical ether, and 4, the life ether, a combination of the first three. Tesla's New York and Colorado experiments confirmed for him that radiant energy was bound up within the elusive ether, but could be made manifest by the creation of an abrupt disruption in the equilibrium of the ether fractions using one-way, high-magnitude pulses of short duration. This was the key that unlocked radiant energy. See the excitement coming. These were the words that Tesla used at the end of his pivotal 1892 December lecture, The Dissipation of Electricity. He was brimming over with buoyancy and optimism for the future. In the 1890s, Tesla conducted a large number of experiments which confirmed his theory and refined his understanding of the special conditions required for radiant energy to express itself. He later expanded his New York work with the large-scale experimental trials conducted at Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1899. Tesla, the humanitarian, wanted more than anything to share this enormous discovery with his fellow man. Tesla spoke of practical applications of radiant energy that were so wide-reaching that they could have created a profound and immense leap into the future for all of mankind in practically every sector of daily life. Unlimited electricity could be made available anywhere and at any time, by merely pushing a rod into the ground and turning on the electrical appliance. Homes, farms, offices, factories, villages, libraries, museums, street lights, etc., could have all their lighting needs met by merely hanging ordinary light bulbs or fluorescent tubes anywhere desired, without the need for wiring, and produce brilliant white light 24 hours a day. Motor energy for any imagined use such as industrial applications, transportation, tractors, trucks, trains, boats, automobiles, airships or planes could be powered freely anywhere on the planet from a single magnifying transmitter. This new form of energy even had the ability to elevate human consciousness to levels of vastly improved comprehension and mental clarity. Undreamed of therapeutic applications to improve human health and to eliminate disease conditions could have been achieved fully 100 years ago had Tesla been allowed to complete his commercial development of radiant energy. But powerful barons of industry, chiefly in the person of John Pierpont Morgan, colluded to deny him the financial backing he needed and in doing so, effectively denied mankind one of nature's most abundant and inexhaustible gifts of free energy. The magnifying transmitter, the closest Tesla came to a worldwide industrial application of his radiant energy dream, was the construction of his huge magnifying transmitter at Shoreham, Long Island, a site which he named Wardenclyffe. Following his return to New York City from Colorado Springs in 1899, Tesla was jubilant and full of enthusiasm to implement his plan for the commercial application of radiant energy. He turned to J.P. Morgan for a substantial portion of the funding to finance the huge project at Wardenclyffe. Morgan was chiefly concerned with turning a profit from overseas radio transmissions since Marconi was fast locking up the market and Morgan, ever the aggressor, wanted a share of the market. When Tesla told him that the transmitter could transmit intelligence to the world, Morgan assumed that he meant ordinary radio communications, but Tesla was not referring to ordinary radio transmissions. He was talking about something much bigger, but avoided revealing all to Morgan during this early phase of the Wardenclyffe project. Some considerable time later, Tesla eventually felt compelled to tell Morgan the larger possibilities offered by the magnifying transmitter when he needed more funding to complete the project. Tesla thought that Morgan would be overwhelmed by his expanded explanation of the true capacities of the transmitter and would be anxious to complete the work, but Tesla's assumption had backfired and Morgan refused to lay out any more money for the transmitter. Sadly, the enormous benefits that could have been made available to society by Tesla's magnifying transmitter project, died then and there. Morgan and Westinghouse. Morgan had already orchestrated circumstances in Tesla's life in order to force Tesla to be dependent on him for financial backing. During an earlier period, when Tesla himself had millions from his polyphase AC generator royalty payments and other earnings, Morgan wanted to woo Tesla with a deal that effectively gave Morgan majority control over his patent rights and projects, but Tesla turned him down, telling Morgan that he had enough money of his own to fund his projects. While returning to his hotel from that very meeting with Morgan, however, Tesla was told that his laboratory had been burned to the ground. It represented a tremendous loss to Tesla and it shook him deeply. Everyone, of course, felt convinced that Morgan was behind the arson. In order to save face, Morgan was embarrassed by Tesla into putting up the money to pay for the rebuilding of a new lab as an act of philanthropy. From that time forward, however, other financial backers were not to be found. Morgan was powerful enough to blacklist Tesla among the Eastern establishment elites that previously had hobnobbed and faded with Tesla as if he was one of their own. Blacklisting and ostracization by officialdom and financiers lifted somewhat after Morgan's death, but generally continued to haunt Tesla for the rest of his life. Before the turn of the century, Tesla also willingly gave up millions, perhaps billions, in royalty earnings to George Westinghouse in an unprecedented act of friendship. Westinghouse had believed in the superiority of Tesla's AC system and provided the money to build Tesla's big AC generators at Niagara Falls, New York. Tesla was paid millions up front for his patents, but was also due to receive royalty earnings for every kilowatt of power produced. When Westinghouse ran into financial difficulties at a later date, Tesla tore up his royalty contract in order to save Westinghouse from financial ruin. Had he not done that, Tesla would have had enough money from royalties to keep him ensconced in great wealth for the rest of his life. The story is frequently told that when Morgan found out from Tesla that the true purpose of the Wardenclyffe transmitter was to provide free electricity to the world, he abruptly pulled the funding. That's not completely accurate. The economic conditions were recessionary at the time and the stock market had taken a considerable dip that year. Morgan wasn't interested in risking any more capital in perilous times on a project he couldn't fully fathom and wasn't completely convinced of. Tesla held land ownership of the Wardenclyffe site and tower, but no further work was done after 1910. In 1914, Tesla was deeply in debt and signed over the deed of Wardenclyffe Station to pay off years of back rent due to the owners of the New Yorker hotel where he was living. He occupied 2 penthouse suites in the hotel. In 1917, the hotel owners had the tower demolished and its parts sold for salvage. Despite the loss of Wardenclyffe, Tesla continued to refine his understanding of radiant energy and miniaturize the equipment needed to produce it. He eventually was able to reduce the equipment down to the size of a suitcase. I have harnessed the cosmic rays and caused them to operate a motive device. Cosmic ray investigation is a subject that is very close to me. I was the first to discover these rays and I naturally feel toward them as I would toward my own flesh and blood. I have advanced a theory of the cosmic rays and at every step of my investigations I have found it completely justified. The attractive features of the cosmic rays is their constancy. They shower down on us throughout the whole 24 hours, and if a plant is developed to use their power it will not require devices for storing energy as would be necessary with devices using wind, tide or sunlight. All of my investigations seem to point to the conclusion that they are small particles, each carrying so small a charge that we are justified in calling them neutrons. They move with great velocity, exceeding that of light. More than 25 years ago I began my efforts to harness the cosmic rays and I can now state that I have succeeded in operating a motive device by means of them. I will tell you in the most general way, the cosmic ray ionizes the air, setting free many charges, ions and electrons. These charges are captured in a condenser which is made to discharge through the circuit of the motor. I have hopes of building my motor on a large scale, but circumstances have not been favorable to carrying out my plan. Historical background. The quest for radiant energy is not new. In fact, the father of the 20th century, Nikola Tesla, experimented quite intensively with radiant energy and even devised a device to capture cosmic rays. Later, Tesla's work was greatly expanded by the research and inventions of T. Henry Moray. T. Henry Moray not only developed a super radiant energy receiver, but a strong case could be made that he was the original inventor of the transistor. The Moray valve, patented in 1932, is a semiconductive device that regulated voltage and current flows. The Moray valve was a germanium-based device whereas the transistor was silicon-based. Silicon is similar but less efficient than germanium for switching electrical currents. Moray's first cousin, Fletcher, knew all about the valve since 1925 when Moray developed it. Coincidentally, Fletcher worked for Bell Labs. It should be no surprise that Bell Labs was looking at semiconductive materials for switching currents. Concurrently with the development of radiant energy receivers was attempts to artificially induce radiant energy. Much of this work was done by Lord Rutherford. In 1932 the first artificially accelerated decay transformation took place at the Cavendish Laboratory using the unstable metal lithium. More recently, I published a brief article in the Extraordinary Science, October/November/December 1994, in the mail call column that cold fusion was a result of a special type of hydrogen reaction due to certain catalysts. I also submitted a paper on August 16, 1994 stating that there was a thermoelectric effect, or Peltier effect, involved. At the Tesla conference in April of this year I announced a totally unsuspected source of energy and how to harness it. More information will be released at this year's Exotic Research Conference in Phoenix, AZ. My conference presentations and published writings point to the fact that I have rediscovered Th. Moray's suppressed technology. I will attempt to make clear in the coming days that an unconventional process to cause a clean nuclear reaction can be created and harnessed. I will soon show that a truly unique nuclear reaction can be converted to electrical power through alpha fusion and thermoelectric effects. These two discoveries are revolutionary to both nuclear fusion reactor and energy conversion technologies of present-day science, respectively. Nikola Tesla's radiant energy system. Nikola Tesla was one of the most prolific inventors in the world's history. His endeavors ranged from energy production to medical devices. In 1901, Nikola Tesla was one of the first to identify radiant energy. Tesla said that the source of this energy is our sun. He concluded that the sun emits small particles, each carrying so small of a charge, that they move with great velocity, exceeding that of light. Tesla further stated that these particles are the neutron particles. Tesla believed that these neutron particles were responsible for all radioactive reactions. Radiant matter is in tune with these neutron particles. Radiant matter is simply a retransmitter of energy from one state to another. Figure 1 of U.S. Patent number 685957 is a diagram of Tesla's first radiant energy receiver. It stored static electricity obtained from the air and converted it to a usable form. Tesla's invention is a simple version of Th. More's device. More's device used a unique rectifier, revalve, to efficiently capture the static electricity from the surrounding air. More's oscillator tubes utilized this high-voltage energy to generate an internal secondary cold nuclear reaction. Stick an antenna up in the air, the higher the better, and wire it to one side of a capacitor. Connect the other side of the capacitor to a good earth ground. The potential difference between air and earth will then charge the capacitor. By connecting across the capacitor some sort of switching device so that the capacitor can be discharged at periodic intervals, you will have an oscillating electric output. More expanded on Tesla's idea to use high voltage to create ionic oscillation. Tesla was fascinated by radiant energy and its free energy possibilities. He called the Crookes radiometer, a device which has vanes that spin in a vacuum when exposed to radiant energy, a beautiful invention. He believed that it would become possible to harness energy directly by connecting to the very will work of nature. On his 76th birthday, at his yearly ritual press conference, Tesla announced a cosmic ray motor. When asked if it was more powerful than the Crookes radiometer, he answered, "Thousands of times more powerful." The New York American, November 1, 1933 issue, announced Tesla's invention in an article. Device to harness cosmic energy claimed by Tesla. This new power for the driving of the world's machinery will be derived from the energy which operates the universe, the cosmic energy, whose central source for the Earth is the sun and which is everywhere present in unlimited quantities. Tesla's free energy concept was patented in 1901 as an apparatus for the utilization of radiant energy. The patent refers to the sun, as well as other sources of radiant energy, like cosmic rays. The fact that the device works at night is explained in terms of the nighttime availability of cosmic rays. Tesla also refers to the ground as a vast reservoir of negative electricity. How Tesla's radiant energy receiver worked. From the electric potential that exists between the elevated plate, plus, and the ground, minus, energy builds up in the capacitor, and, after a suitable time interval, the accumulated energy will manifest itself in a powerful discharge that can do work. The capacitor, says Tesla, should be of considerable electrostatic capacity, and its dielectric made of the best quality mica, for it has to withstand potentials that could rupture a weaker dielectric. Tesla gives various options for the switching device. One is a rotary switch that resembles a Tesla circuit controller. Another is an electrostatic device consisting of two very light, membranous conductors suspended in a vacuum. These sense the energy build up in the capacitor, one charging positive, the other negative, and, at a certain charge level, are attracted, touch, and thus fire the capacitor. Tesla also mentions another switching device consisting of a minute air gap or weak dielectric film that breaks down suddenly when a certain potential is reached. Tesla harnesses Cosmic energy inventor announces discovery to displace fuel in driving machinery. Calls sun main source. A principle by which power for driving machinery of the world may be developed from the cosmic energy which operates the universe, has been discovered by Nikola Tesla, noted physicist and inventor of scientific devices, he announced today. This principle, which taps a source of power described as everywhere present in unlimited quantities and which may be transmitted by wire or wireless from central plants to any part of the globe, will eliminate the need of coal, oil, gas or any other of the common fuels, he said. Dr. Tesla in a statement today at his hotel indicated the time was not far distant when the principle would be ready for practical commercial development. Asked whether the sudden introduction of his principle would upset the present economic system, Dr. Tesla replied, "It is badly upset already." He added that now as never before was the time ripe for the development of new resources. While in its present form, the theory calls for the development of energy in central plants requiring vast machinery. Dr. Tesla said he might be able to work out a plan for its use by individuals. The central source of cosmic energy for the Earth is the Sun, Dr. Tesla said, but night will not interrupt the flow of new power supply. Tesla received 2 patents for this radiant energy device. U.S. Patent number 685,957, apparatus for the utilization of radiant energy. U.S. Patent number 685,958, method of utilizing radiant energy. Both patents were filed on March 21, 1901 and granted November 5, 1901. In these patents he explains, the Sun, as well as other sources of radiant energy throw off minute particles of matter positively electrified, which, impinging upon the upper plate, communicate continuously an electrical charge to the same. The opposite terminal of the condenser being connected to ground, which may be considered as a vast reservoir of negative electricity, a feeble current flows continuously into the condenser, and inasmuch as the particles are charged to a very high potential, this charging of the condenser may continue, as I have actually observed, almost indefinitely, even to the point of rupturing the dielectric. The Earth's electrostatic charge. Tesla's intent was to condense the energy trapped between the Earth and its upper atmosphere and to transform it into an electric current. He pictured the Sun as an immense ball of electricity, positively charged with a potential of some 200 billion volts. The Earth, on the other hand, is charged with negative electricity. The tremendous electrical force between these two bodies constituted, at least in part, what he called cosmic energy. It varied from night to day and from season to season, but it is always present. The positive particles are stopped at the ionosphere, and between it and the negative charges in the ground, a distance of 60 miles, there is a large difference of voltage, something on the order of 360,000 volts. With the gases of the atmosphere acting as an insulator between these two opposite stores of electrical charges, the region between the ground and the edge of space traps a great deal of energy. Despite the large size of the planet, it is electrically like a capacitor which keeps positive and negative charges apart by using the air as a non-conducting material as an insulator. It has been calculated that the Earth's ambient state contains 1.6 times 10 power 11 joules or 4.5 megawatt-hours of electrical energy. In order to utilize this high-voltage energy, you must do 2 things, make an energy sink and then devise a way of making the sink oscillate. 0-point energy. Such a sink has to be at a lower energy state than the surrounding medium, and, for the energy to continually flow into it, the energy must be continually pumped out of it. Additionally, this sink must maintain a lower energy state while meeting the power requirements of the load attached to it. Electrical energy watt-seconds is a product of volts x amps x seconds. Because the period of oscillation does not change, either voltage or current has to be the variable in this system's energy equation. Bifilar wound coils are used in the system because a bifilar wound coil maximizes the voltage difference between its turns, the current is then minimized. A coil in our system, then, will be set into oscillation at its resonant frequency by an external power source. During the zero-point portion of its cycle, the coil will appear as one plate of a capacitor. As the voltage across the coil increases, the amount of charge it can siphon will increase. The energy that is taken into the coil through the small energy window, 0 point, call it what you will, appears to be the key to the success of this system. It is at this 0 point where energy is condensed into positive and negative components of current. When energy escapes from the sink, the magnetic field collapses and a strong magnetic quake is created in its wake. A properly tuned system can capture and convert radiant energy in such a prescribed arrangement. United States Patent Number 512340 Coil for Electromagnets. Nikola Tesla, inventor. Figure 1 is a standard pancake coil. Many Tesla coil builders are familiar with this style. Figure 2 is a bifilar coil. The crux of the patent is where Tesla winds a dual wire and then connects the ends in a series, an interesting experiment for coil builders. Tesla explains that a standard coil of 1000 turns with a potential of 100 volts across it will have a difference of 0.1 volt between turns. A similar bifilar coil will have a potential of 50 volts between turns. In that the stored energy is a function of the square of the voltages, the energy in the bifilar will be 502/12 equal 2500/01 equal 250,000 times greater than the standard coil. Direct conversion of the atom's energy. The radiant energy system is a self-oscillating capacitive system. Once it is set into oscillation, very little power is expended in keeping it going. Because it is an electrostatic oscillating system, only a small amount of charge moves through the system per cycle, low current. If the charge is used at a low rate, the energy stored in the system will be turned into heat at a slow rate, enabling the oscillations to continue for a long period of time. Tesla's U.S. Patent Number 512340, coil for electromagnets, is a very special coil design because, unlike an ordinary coil made by turning wire on a tube form, this one uses two wires laid next to each other on a form but with the end of the first one connected to the beginning of the second one. In this patent, Tesla explains that the double coil will store many times the energy of a conventional coil. Measurements of two coils of the same size and with the same number of turns, one with a single, the other with a bifilar winding, show differences in voltage gain. These bifilar coils can be explained solely on the basis of their electrical activity. A bifilar coil is capable of holding more charge than a single wound coil. When operated at resonance, the distributed capacitance of the bifilar coil is able to overcome the counter-electromotive force, EMF, normal to coils, inductive reactance. Because of the electrical activity, a bifilar coil does not work against itself in the form of a counter, EMF, the potential across the coil quickly builds to a high value. The difference between the turns becomes great enough that the energy is practically all potential. At this point, the system becomes an electrostatic oscillator. Minimal work is done in my radiant energy system due to the absence of wasted displacement currents. As small heat losses occur, oscillations are maintained by surplus charge generated by atomic catalytic reactions. Energy is siphoned from the kinetic moments of these charges. Very low energy expenditure allows power delivery to an electrical load over an extended time period without an external fuel supply. After an initial input of energy from an outside source, the radiant energy electrical generator will operate as a very efficient device.